Like Saturday, I am having trouble seeing my own screen. So let me just welcome everybody to our hot topic with Dr. Butzin. I don't know why I'm having trouble with that simple last name. Please, if you can, mute your microphone so we can eliminate some of the noise. As you know, this meeting is being recorded as well as being recorded in YouTube and will be available to you all and to our membership in a couple of days. All questions will come through the chat and be addressed to Sally after her presentation. And with that, Jane, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Welcome to our Hot Topics meeting for this month of October. My name is Jane Spruill, and I'm the president for the League of Women Voters, Pensacola Bay Area. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization, which means we do not support a particular candidate or party. Instead, we encourage informed and active participation in government through voting. Our league is very visible, providing voter registration throughout the community. If you know any one thing about the League of Women Voters, it's probably that we register voters, and yes, that's true. In addition to our voter registration efforts, we are very proud of the opportunities to educate and to influence public policy concerning local, state, and national issues. This is accomplished through the many programs and events that we hold throughout the year. Events like this hot topic meeting on school vouchers allows us to bring in experts on the topic to address our concerns locally. Longtime member Dr. Paula Montgomery deserves a special thank you for getting this presentation done. She had lots of details to finalize, and she told me she invited more than 20 organizations throughout the community. We want to welcome you here if you are a guest, and please look for the events that we schedule because I think you'll find them interesting. If you're not a member, consider joining. We welcome women and men, we have men who are members, to become empowered voters and better able to defend democracy. It gives me great honor to introduce our speaker for tonight. Dr. Sally Butzin is a retired educator currently serving as the president of the League of Women Voters in Tallahassee. And she serves on the Education Issues Task Force for the League of Women Voters of Florida. Dr. Butzin is the founding president and executive director of the Institute for School for Innovation in Tallahassee. Among many awards and recognitions, she was named Distinguished Educator by Florida State University's College of Education. Dr. Butzin has published widely in educational and technology journals. She's the author of Joyful Classrooms in an Age of Accountability, the Project Child Recipe for Success. Her most recent book is Creating a Joyful Classroom, a positive response to testing and accountability in elementary school. What a challenge that is. She is a frequent guest columnist on the education issues for the Tallahassee Democrat newspaper. The League opposes the expansion of private school vouchers with no transparency or accountability. Dr. Butzin will speak on the investigative report that reveals operations of Step Up for Students, a private scholarship funding organization that manages and promotes Florida's expanding voucher program with very little oversight. Thank you, Dr. Butzin.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. It's an honor to be with fellow leaguers and guests. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to start sharing my screen so I can show you some slides that I have prepared. Okay. Can everybody see that? Okay, good.
Right.
All right. Well, this is a report that a group of us from the Tallahassee League with some help from other leagues looked into this organization called Step Up for Students. We call it a preliminary report because we hope that what we found, which is just the tip of the iceberg, will encourage others like investigative reporters or somebody that has more expertise in investigating these kind of issues will take this up and run with it. This is our group. We're just a bunch of volunteers. We're mostly retired educators. Some of you may know the work of Sue Legg from the Gainesville League, who she is really an expert in a lot of these issues that we looked into, particularly with private schools and the testing and accountability issues. So let's first take a look at Florida's voucher program. There are 5 scholarship programs, and notice I put that in quotations because they have cleverly called this a scholarship program when in fact we know it's a voucher. But scholarship has a certain cachet and makes people think, oh, I got a scholarship. That's very impressive. The scholarships are worth about $7,000 to $10,000 depending on which type you get. It started with one called the Family Empowerment Scholarship, which was designed for students attending a low-performing school to be able to go to a private school. Now, this whole program was started about 20 years ago when Jeb Bush was governor. And we know that he was the architect, and it's been going on ever since. This whole school choice and privatization is marching along since it started. So then the next couple of years, they came along with a new scholarship called the Gardner Scholarship. And this was designed for students with special needs to qualify for a voucher. Then a new one came called the Florida Tax Credit Scholarship. And this was for low-income students to attend a private school. And then they added the Hope Scholarship just a few years ago. And this is the one for students who have been bullied, that they can say they've been bullied and they need a voucher to go to a private school. And this has also made the news because now this is the scholarship you can get if your child has a mask requirement at their school and you don't want your child to wear a mask. So that's a new wrinkle with that scholarship. Then there's also a reading scholarship for people or for students with low reading scores. So there's a lot of variety of how you can qualify to get some of this money. Now, what they've done this year is really stunning. This is the expansion of the voucher program that we're going to talk about tonight. This is what just became law this year and signed by the governor, and this is what's in operation as we speak for the current school year. So what they did was to take those 5 scholarship programs and rolled them into 2. And the first one is the tax credit scholarship. And this is funded through what they call donations. Again, I put that in quotations because this is a dollar for dollar tax credit that corporations and businesses get for sending their tax money to Step Up for Students rather than sending it to the government to fund our government and our public schools. And these scholarships or vouchers can be used for tuition for private schools or transportation to get to a private school or another school. Now, the new one this year is called the Family Empowerment Scholarship Program, FES. And this, for the first time, is funding directly from general revenue, or the FEFP, which is the Florida Education Finance Program. This is the first time now that our general revenue is being used to fund these vouchers. And the way this new one works is this is kind of open season. So if you qualify for one of these FES scholarships, you get an educational savings account in your name, an ESA as they call them. I think of it like a debit card. So you get a debit card that then you can spend the parent that gets the card or the savings account for a wide variety of expenses supposedly related to education. So that you can get books or tutoring or software, or computers, all kinds of things. which is a whole new wrinkle now this year. Now this year, as I said, for the first time, they're taking money directly from general revenue. And so I looked at a memo that just came out to your district and all districts in September. Across the state, $840.8 million now is being deducted, as they call it, adjusted for the scholarships. And I looked up Escambia County. They're going to lose $12.9 million this year so that they can send it over to fund the vouchers. What they've done this year to expand is also increasingly troubling. Like I said, when this whole scheme started 20 years ago, it was designed to help children of high poverty. So they keep raising the poverty level. Now this year, it's way up. So a family of 4 with $100,000 income now qualifies to receive a state voucher. And each year, according to this new legislation, this amount will increase annually. So it just keeps going up and up. Once in, always in, which means that once your child gets one of these vouchers, they keep it as long as they stay in a private school or whatever, tutoring, whatever they're getting, until they graduate. And even if your income increases, even if you win the lottery, you still get to keep that voucher year after year. And they go up in value, I should say, too. Now, the other thing they did this year, they took away the requirement that you had to first be attending a public school. Now anybody can qualify, homeschoolers, whatever. If you want to move from a private school to another private school, you can now do that. They've expanded the qualifying disabilities. So any number of physical learning disabilities and so on qualify. They've added siblings. So once one child in the family gets one of these vouchers, the rest get them as well. And even dependent children of armed service members are now eligible. Another new thing that they expanded this year is that ESA. Remember, that stands for Educational Savings Account, or your debit card. If you don't spend all that, your $10,000 or whatever you were awarded, you can roll that extra money into a college savings account. So over time, this could be quite substantial. Also, they've really loosened the accountability piece, because now SFO stands for Scholarship Funding Organization, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. They used to have an annual audit. Now they only have to have an audit every 3 years, and they've raised the administrative fee that these organizations can charge to 2.5% and then 3% in some cases. And then the so-called donors, these corporations that are diverting their taxes, now are confidential. So we used to know who were all these people, these companies funding this voucher program, but now the legislature has passed a law to make it confidential. So, excuse me just a minute. Let's talk about what Scholarship Funding Organization is. This was, again, created during the Jeb Bush administration. So this has been going on for about 20 years. And so Step Up for Students is the big boy. They administer almost all of the vouchers in Florida. They also do work in Alabama. There's another small foundation called AAA, and they do just a small amount. But most all of the work is done by Step Up. Excuse me. So for simplicity, I'm going to keep calling them Step Up, but it's Step Up for Students. So they take an administrative fee for each voucher they hand out. They get 2.5% to 3%. So we just figured, like in 1 year, for example, 2020, there were $874 million in vouchers, which would make about 21 million for Step Up. here they are. This is no small potatoes group. Again, this is a private organization using basically public money to fund their operation. They're headquartered in Jacksonville. They also have a subsidiary in Clearwater. Let's look at how big they are. They were founded in 2002 by John Kirtley. Kirtley is a hedge fund manager in Tampa. He's a billionaire, highly connected politically, as you might not be surprised. And he was the founder of this Step Up for Students. In 2020, when we found this, we were just aghast. Step Up for Students is the 21st largest charity, so-called, in the United States. Now, this is huge. We're talking about groups like the American Cancer Society and groups like that. So this is a very large organization that few people in Florida have ever heard of, few people anywhere. In fact, whenever I ask my education friends, have you ever heard of Step Up for Students? Never heard of it. Well, now tonight you're going to hear about it. Their 2019 financial statements, quite generous. As you can see, they're well financed. And as this program grows, you can see that it's going to get bigger and bigger. And this year they really expanded it big time. So this amount was from 2 years ago. So who knows what they're making now. And as I said, they're in Jacksonville. They have, again, this is data from 2 years ago when we could find their records from 2019. At that time, they had 265 employees and $18 million payroll. Their president has a salary of 6 figures. And in fact, 11 key employees at that time had 6-figure salaries. So again, this is not some little nonprofit. This is a very big operation. They have an 8-member board. And again, you might not be surprised to know that their corporate and political affiliations, if you go to their website, all this information is there. Former legislators, there's even a congressman from here in North Florida named Al Lawson, who's on their board. So they're very well connected politically. Now, one of the things that I found in our group, our team found very, clever, is the way they have co-opted the language to make it sound so much better than it really is. So what is really a voucher, they have labeled them scholarships. So that has a certain prestige attached to it. So they keep talking about scholarships. So, I slip into that sometime too, but remember, we're talking about vouchers. Now, they've also cleverly called what the money they get donations. But these are not donations in the sense we would think of, where you're getting a donation from their profits or for their general budget from these companies. No, this is a dollar for dollar tax credit. They're just being able to divert it over to Step Up for Students rather than paying their taxes to the state like they should. And that, well, they should, but the legislature has, carved out this exemption for them. And then what they call a charity, that they're, this wonderful organization giving out these so-called scholarships. No, it's a money management marketing firm. They are just managing all this money and sending out the voucher money. And then a big part of what they do with the funds that they get is to market this whole program. So they're very skilled at marketing and sales on how to make this work. Here's where they get their funds. And now, as I said, they're add to this general revenue funds. But prior to that, they were very astute in setting this up as a nonprofit, separate organization. So it's funded from corporate income taxes, excise taxes, you can see that, gas and oil, insurance. And now this last one, I want you all to pay real attention to, because this affects every consumer. Because they've also added a little deal that when you purchase a vehicle now, when you go to get your car or your truck or whatever, they hand you a whole stack of papers that you have to sign. Well, one of those is an authorization where you are permitting a certain amount of the sales tax that goes for that vehicle to go to the voucher program. So be aware of that if you're buying a vehicle and you don't care to fund this, you have the right not to sign it. But most people just sign it because they don't have any idea what they're signing. We'll talk about that a little more later. So we calculated that since this program started in 2002, $3 billion has been diverted that would have gone into our state revenue to fund our government and to fund our public schools. Now, back when we did know who the major contributors are, now, as I told you, this year they're kept confidential. But the big players is the alcohol industry, insurance, healthcare. The big players obviously are very big part of this whole program. Some of the notable names that were available in the records that we could find in our report, you'll see many of them we know well. I was so disappointed to see Skechers because I like to wear Skechers shoes, but oh well. But as I said, now we don't know who these donors are. And I think one of the things that happened was that some of these private schools that were discriminating against certain children, the press got wind of that. And so that some of these corporations started feeling uncomfortable about being noted that they were donors or they were tax diverters. So they've now made it confidential so they can do it without anybody knowing. So in 2019, there were 250 of these so-called donors. So $618 million is quite nice that they were able to divert over to Step Up for Students. So here's an example of some of the marketing then promoting that Step Up for Students does. They have this cartoon characters. Pardon me, I'm going to take some water here.
Urinating a lot. And he said that
somebody's not muted if you want to mute. Anyway, this is an example of some of their social media marketing. They have webinars, they have consultants who will help parents apply and do all the applications, get all the paperwork together. They're really good at legislative testimony and bringing students up to Tallahassee to rally. They spend a lot of money up here to promote this with our legislature to keep this going and to keep expanding it. They make campaign contributions through PACs that they have, and we'll see that in a minute. And now they also are, now that these educational savings accounts are in play, they now have a link on their website to vendors. So parents that have these accounts, they can just go directly to the vendors who are pushing these materials and software and whatever it is that they're selling. And they can just conveniently buy it right from the Step Up website. And it would be interesting, again, for some investigation to look into what are the connections between all these commercial products to Step Up and other legislators and so on. And then they also spend a lot of their marketing money lobbying the corporations and convincing them to divert their taxes over to these scholarship voucher programs. Now, I'm a member of the lobby corps here in Tallahassee for the league. And I would go up to the Capitol back when we could go to the Capitol before COVID. And I would sit in on the hearings on education and when they would discuss this legislation. And I remember so well that when this new law was starting to percolate up with these educational savings accounts, some of the legislators, it was the Democrats who are, the Republicans are all promoting this, but they would raise questions about how are you going to protect from fraud? How do you know somebody that gets one of these savings accounts isn't going to use it for, take a trip to Disney World and call it a field trip? And the promoter of this, who's Senator Manny Diaz from Miami, he kept saying, oh, don't worry, we have guardrails built in here. There's no problem. It's going to be very safe. But the more our investigative team looked into this, we said, wait a minute, these guardrails are made of toothpicks because it's not really very strong. It's not clear how there is going to be monitoring and accountability for all this money that's flowing through to these individual parents. So as of when we did the report, there were 1,800 plus private schools. And the interesting thing is that 66% of them are religious, most Christian schools. And this is always the question that the league is concerned about, among other things, is don't we have a constitution that advocates for the separation of church and state? And here we are using public money for religious schools. And the answer that, of course, they say is, but it's not public money. This is this is corporate donations. Well, now they are actually using public money this year. So this remains to be seen how this is going to be litigated and anybody's going to take this to court, because clearly it's a violation of the Constitution. So over 1 million scholarships have been awarded. Again, they call them scholarships, but it's vouchers. So this is, again, a growing, huge program. And what we want to know, where are the guardrails? Who's monitoring for income eligibility? This is what Step Up is supposed to be doing. But from what we could see in a lot of the reports, it wasn't clear that that was actually happening. And again, where are these guardrails to make sure these savings accounts are being spent correctly on appropriate educational materials or services? There is one piece in the law that if a school is a certain size, they are supposed to be giving a national norm reference test, but who's monitoring for that and make sure that's happening? Because, one of the things about this whole program is that private schools do not have to take the same test as our public schools and our charter schools do. So they have no testing requirements at all, except if they're a large school, they're supposed to. And then who's monitoring to make sure that, the children that are being accepted are actually qualified according to the criteria? Well, the answer from the Department of Education, when we've asked about it, they say, well, these are private schools, so it's up to the parents. So our Department of Education completely has washed their hands of this. They just turn it all over to Step Up for Students. And it's supposed to be Step Up's job to monitor and make sure things are the way they're supposed to be. But it's, as far as how are the teachers qualified, we don't know, because they're private schools. There's no requirement that they have certified teachers. And again, the Department of Education and the legislators' answer is, well, it's up to the parents. If they don't like it, they don't have to go there. What's the curriculum? Are they teaching, standards-based, research-based, science-based curriculum, or are they teaching some, who knows what, Taliban? There could be a Taliban school out there for all we know. What are the learning outcomes? Again, we should all be concerned if children are learning. These are our future citizens. It's not just up to parents to say, oh, my child's getting straight A's, but what are they learning? That's important as a society. What are their discipline policies? How are they treating these kids? We've heard some horror stories about schools with, extreme corporal punishment and things like that. Discriminatory policies. As I said before, there's been some bad press with some schools that were discriminating against LGBTQ students, and they were expelled or not even, welcome to come in the first place. What about safety and security? Of course, our public schools, have to meet health standards and safety standards. They have to be built to withstand hurricanes, so they can be hurricane shelters. But all this money that's going to these private schools, are these kids safe? We should all be concerned about that. And what about students with special needs? And this is a real problem for many of these very small schools They don't have the capacity. And we're talking, a lot of these vouchers are going to very small startup kind of private schools in the church basement, that kind of thing. Most of these are not the really high-end college prep private schools. These are very marginal. And of course, as I said, now they've opened it up to homeschoolers. So you could see, somebody could start up a homeschool with a few neighborhood kids. And, again, what are the qualifications of the teachers and the curriculum? We don't know. We also looked into some of the financial issues with Step Up for Students, and I'm getting toward the end here. And as I said, we don't know because the legislature's now made it confidential. Our folks that looked into their financial records, found a lot of things like questions about, they had lots of remote employees. Of course, this was before COVID. So what are they doing? And how are they being paid? Who's protecting that they're not disclosing sensitive personal information? They're supposed to have an audit of the schools if they get more than $250,000, but our folks that looked into that found that often wasn't happening, and what are the consequences? And then what about this? With all this money they're bringing in, they're earning a lot of interest. And 501c3, the IRS, you're not allowed to use interest for your operating funds. You have to use it on your programs. But who knows whether they're actually doing that? And then what is the remedy? With these schools, and we saw many cases where an audit would show that there was a school not in compliance as far as, accepting kids that weren't eligible or whatever. And what happens? We don't know. Do they just keep going, or does somebody actually close them down? So the other thing is follow the money. And as I said, some of these key players, John Kirtley, their founder, he has a big PAC, a political action committee, huge donations they make to our legislators. You have board members who serve on both the Florida Step Up, and then they also serve on Alabama. And we're not sure whether their board members are paid or not. That's something we couldn't find out. And as I said, this Senator Manny Diaz Jr. from Miami, he has his own PAC, which he, in 2021, which is a pretty sizable chunk of money that he can dole out to friendly legislators. And this quote, and Step Up, by the way, they have responded to our report that, they say we just don't understand how it all works, but we actually do. Like one of our people said, it's like they had this attitude of like, oh, these little ladies just don't understand how this all operates. Well, actually, we do understand very well. And we found this quote, and they said, oh, that's an old quote, but it still shows you they know what they're doing. They're the biggest spenders in local Senate and House races. So they're very influential in making sure this program continues. And then they're real proud of this, that they're creating this whole new vendor industry where people can start making these products and services that they can put on their website so people can use their savings accounts. So what we're creating here is a parallel school system. And in fact, I heard one legislator when I was up there in the Capitol say his goal was that he'd like to see our whole school system become a privatized one where every parent would get a savings account to do whatever they wanted with it. So what we have right now is a parallel. One is highly regulated, our public schools, and one not at all, as you're seeing tonight. We're also seeing our schools begin to resegregate and discriminate against students with special needs. So our public schools are left with the most difficult to teach kids and are underfunded and continue to really struggle. And that's intentional. I really think it is. And they've set up this whole Step Up nonprofit, so-called charity, which has so far provided a smokescreen so they can get around the constitutional issue. And in fact, the Supreme Court of Florida threw out the lawsuit. The Florida Education Association did bring a lawsuit about this a few years ago, but it was thrown out because they lacked taxpayer standing, since technically this was not funded by taxpayers. However, as I said, this new law, the expanded program, now does include taxpayer funded directly. So in conclusion, I want to bring this man's to your attention. Anybody know who that is? He is the father of public education. Any of you that went to colleges of education learned about him. This is Horace Mann. And Horace Mann in the 1830s was the advocate for beginning to start a system. Excuse me, I got to take some more water. A system of public schools, because at that time America was just beginning to become a industrialized country. And then education was kind of a hodgepodge of home schools, of religious schools. The Catholic Church had schools. Rich people could start their own private schools, but it was a little bit of everything, and a lot of kids were not really being educated at all. And he realized, as other thinkers did, that if we were going to have a true prosperous country, as well as a prosperous democracy, you needed to have an educated public. So he came up with these 6 principles. And I want you to contrast his principles with what's going on now in Florida and other states that are moving away from a public system to this privatized, non-regulated system. But his main principle was the public should no longer remain ignorant. And I'll tell you what, when you look at what's happening out there now with the vaccines and the masks, you have to wonder about people's knowledge of science and statistics in this day and age. It should be paid for, controlled, and sustained by an interested public. So we all have a stake in having a well-educated public and having our kids learning things that are going to help our country advance and prosper and help our democracy be vibrant. And he saw the need to move away from the rich schools and the poor schools, but have a variety. Children needed to be mixing with a variety of backgrounds. So all children, it should be universal education. Non-sectarian, as I said, a lot of the schools back in his day were run by the church, and that obviously was problematic in a country that was had multiple religions. They should taught using the tenets of a free society. And finally, I like this one, provided well-trained professional teachers. And I have to say, when you think of people that think, oh, anybody can teach, and now of course, with a teacher shortage, I was really shocked to learn, we have a lot of kids now being taught by permanent substitutes. And a substitute in Leon County, where I live, you have to have a high school degree and pass a background check. Now, for those of us that were trained as professional teachers and took hours and coursework in pedagogy and classroom management and curriculum and development and child development and child psychology and all the things that we learned, to think that anybody can just pick that up is just not realistic and very dangerous. And that's where we're headed. So that's what I wanted to tell you about the expanded voucher program, the lack of accountability, the lack of transparency, and the danger of this parallel school system with very little regulation, and it's using our money and we have no control over it. And that's something that the League is concerned about. And I welcome your questions. Feel free to contact me. If you want to get the full report, I will send a link to Joe. It's actually on the state website, LWV Florida. you can find the full report there if you're interested. But I'm happy to take your questions, and I'll turn off my screen. And I apologize for my voice giving out on me. But
And Sally, we do have a few questions here for you.
okay.
Let me pull them up. You talked about the educational savings account.
Mhm.
What is the name of the college fund that the ESAs are allowed to roll into, or is it just one of your own personal ones?
I think it's probably like the Florida prepaid program, I would think. But there again, I'm not sure. It could be just, your own personal savings account that you keep for a college fund. But I think it's probably related to the Florida prepaid program. But that's a good question. There again, like I said, there's still a lot of things that need to be uncovered in this report. We just scratched the surface.
Have you shared this report with any Republican legislators?
We haven't shared it specifically with any legislators. We've put it out there to the press. I've even sent it to 60 Minutes, hoping they'd be interested. But no, we haven't sent it to any legislators, but probably maybe we should if they would choose to read it.
Okay. And one other question from Carol. The 12.9 million figure you cited for Escambia County, where does that come from?
Well, that is from the FEFP. So each district gets a certain amount of money based on the number of students they have. There's all kinds of formulas, and so that figure was what is on a chart that this is from the Department of Education. It lists each district, and the heading says net state FEFP amounts adjusted for scholarships. So this is what each district received with this memo to say how much is going to be adjusted, in other words, taken away from their FEFP amount.
Okay. Right now, those are the only questions in chat. Anybody else on this Zoom meeting have questions for Sally?
Hi, Dr. Butzin. I'm Carol Cleaver. Nice to meet you virtually. So I want to follow up. So the 12.9, that was my question.
Mhm.
So the state takes it from the FEFP before they even send it on to the counties?
That's the way I interpret it. They're just telling them here's what you should expect to get after this is deducted for the scholarship program. So this memo that I'm referring to, I'm just alerting it's just alerting the districts to expect that they're going to be less money than they expected. And it's interesting because my question has been, so this money in the total, like I said, the whole state, the total is 840.8 million. Does that just get swept right over to Step Up for Students, or how does that work? So I've been trying to get an answer from the Department of Education, but typically I called the contact person that they have on their memo, and he's like, I don't know, but I can, tell you somebody. So he gives me the name of somebody else. So I call that person, and the phone rings and rings. No, they're not answering. And then it says the mailbox is full, so you can't leave a message. So I've got my state legislators trying to find out the answer, and they've been stonewalled as well. So it's been like 2 weeks. So it's really, who knows? That's the problem with trying to do this kind of work, is you can't get answers. So, but my suspicion is there's another 840 million plus just going right over to Step Up for Students. So that's a nice little chunk of change they're going to have to work with on top of the corporate taxes they're getting.
You were talking about Escambia County. Do you know how much Santa Rosa County is getting?
Let me look here on my chart. It looks to me like it's about, they're going to lose about $5 1.3 million.
Okay. And one other question, do you know how many other states have the same type of program?
Um, I know, well, Alabama does because Step Up works with them. Arizona is a big privatization state. They have a lot of vouchers in Arizona, and I expect Texas, but I'm not sure. That's a good question, but it's a growing phenomenon, especially in the southern Republican-led states.
Okay. And what suggestions do you have for all of us to fight this, both educational outcomes and the bad financial oversight?
Well, I think just getting the word out is important because, like as I say, I think most people are just unaware of this whole program that's going on right under their nose. And I think, the problem that we really have to be realistic, and this is growing, exponentially. It's very popular among certain people with money and clout. And as I say, the train has left the station. So I really realistically don't see how we can stop it. But what I hope the league will be successful in, and you can all help talk to your legislators, at the very least, if they're using public money, they should have to have the same accountability and the same standards. They should have to have certified teachers. There should be some kind of monitoring to know that these children are learning something and that the curriculum is appropriate. If people want to go to private schools, of course they can. And there are, it's not all black and white because there are, kids in public schools that aren't really good, having a good education. And so if a parent can get them into a better place, every parent wants to do that. But the problem is, how do the parents really know that these schools are adequate? Especially, if they're not a sophisticated, educated person that has had, educational training, they don't know. So I hope that, we can convince somebody, maybe the courts will have to step in, that if they're going to use public money for private education, those private schools have to meet the same standards and have to have the same accountability as all the schools. For the kids' sake, it's protecting the children.
Would you have a problem, Sally, if we tried to publish your report in our local newspaper?
No, I would, what you probably might want to do is like write a letter to the editor or something like that with a link to the report. And in fact, I'll send you, we have a one-page press release that you're welcome to use for your paper, and you could, modify it however you wanted to. But getting the publicity out is the way to go. And the other thing, the little thing that I mentioned before is about the vehicle purchases. Now, we've had some interesting stories because, like, one of the members that I spoke with, she knew about this. So when she bought her car, she didn't sign it. Well, they gave her a really hard time. Well, you're supposed, and then she had the manager come in and he didn't even know what it was. So one of the things that, maybe a local league could do is go do a little program for all of the car dealers and just say, hey, do you know what you're having all these people sign? But there again, on the surface, the one that your car taxes go to is the Hope Scholarship. And that's the one for so-called bullied kids. And so, you say, oh, who doesn't want to help children who are bullied? That just sounds so warm-hearted and everything. So you can see why most people would say, oh, yeah, I'll sign that. But as you're learning tonight, it's a lot more subtle than that.
Okay, Jane, that's our questions. Can we turn this over to you?
Thank you, Joe. Wow, that's just overwhelming almost to know this is happening. But we need to speak up and we need to share the news with everybody, I think is one big part of it. People don't realize what's happening. And like you said, maybe they've never read about it. They haven't seen it anywhere, but I would think that would be a part that would be important, something that we could do as a league and the statewide.
Yeah, as I say, I'll send it to Jane. Should I send it to you? I don't know who. I think I have
Yeah, that's fine.
whoever. I have somebody's email, but I'll send you the link to the report and the one-page press release, and
Right.
feel free to share it as you wish. Because
Yeah,
we'd like
my
to get the
question
word.
was going to be how many lawsuits are going on, and then I saw Carol respond to it and say the courts are overwhelmed with things that are happening in education in this state. So,
Well, and as you know, with the league, we're also now in a lawsuit with about SB 90, the voter suppression bill. And so lawsuits are very, very, very expensive.
Right.
And, the concern now is that, then it goes from one to that until it finally gets to the Supreme Court. And now that the Supreme Court is so conservative, it's probably, just a lost cause there too. We'll
wow.
see.
Well,
So all we can do is just, keep moving forward and keep fighting for democracy and empowering voters as we do. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys, and come over to Tallahassee and come up to the Capitol with us sometime and see it in action. It's an interesting process. So thank you and good night. I've enjoyed being with you.